welcome back to my channel and welcome to today's video. If you're new here, my name is Georgina, co-owner of Ivy and Twine candles, and in today's video we're going to be talking all about smooth tops on candles and how you can achieve them if you are struggling with bumpy tops, sinkholes or any other imperfections on your candles. I really want you to look at this more as a checklist rather than a secret rule of thumb or a cure-all. And that's because what works for one candle maker will probably not work for another candle maker, because there are so many different factors and variables involved in candle making, and each one of these will really affect the overall look and finish of your candles. But I do hope that if this is something that you are struggling with, that you can work through this checklist, try out these different tips and ultimately, hopefully, arrive with a candle that you are happy with. If you're really new to candle making especially, I know it can seem like everybody's got it figured out. The truth of the matter though is that most candle makers, myself included, have gone through so many imperfect candles before they have arrived at one which they are happy enough to sell. And honestly, if you're completely brand new and you've not even made your first candle yet, then please do just prepare yourself to go through a whole lot of trial and error, because that is really the reality of candle making. And it's okay if the first candle or first set of candles that you've made are not perfect. I really would encourage you to just stick at it though, persevere, look at these tips, change things if you can, and I'm sure it will all be worth it in the end. So now we've got that little disclaimer out of the way, I'd just like to ask you to please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already, if you are interested in candle making, candle business and generally small business related content. I post new sit down videos every Tuesday as well as a weekly vlog every Friday, so please do feel free to subscribe if any of those things are of interest to you, as well as clicking the wee bell so you do get notified when I post a new video. And with all that said and done, let's jump right in. Now of course, prevention is better than cure, so first of all we're going to talk about how you can avoid sinkholes, bumps, lumps and any other imperfections you might be experiencing. Now we are going to be talking a lot about temperatures, and that's because if you didn't know, temperatures have a huge role to play in candle making and basically can have a huge effect on the overall look as well as the performance of your candles. And this is a biggie, especially if you work with SOY or a SOY blend, because let me tell you, I have been there and I have worked through each of these factors myself in the hopes of creating a perfect soy wax candle. So the first temperature I want you to really pay attention to is the pouring temperature of your wax. Oftentimes myself, I am asked on DMs and comments on the various different social media platforms what temperature I pour my wax at and what temperature I think other people should be pouring their wax at for their candles. And the honest truth is, again, it will vary so much from wax to wax. And I don't just mean in terms of what that wax is made of, i.e. soy, paraffin, coconut or any other vegetable based waxes, but I also mean the manufacturer of those waxes. And then even on a much smaller scale, for example, Kerax could create a whole different bunch of soy waxes which could each have their own different requirements in terms of pouring temperatures, etc. So my first recommendation for you is to go directly to either the manufacturer or the supplier which you have bought your wax from, as oftentimes the recommended pouring temperature of that wax will be readily available on their website. And if it isn't, then I would just recommend emailing the supplier or manufacturer to find out what temperature they would recommend pouring at. If you have tried that and it's not working for you, then I would recommend altering that by about 5 degrees. So try pouring 5 degrees hotter and 5 degrees cooler and seeing if that has any impact on the finish of the candles. From what I've read in the past, a lot of the time people think that if you do have bumpy tops or any other imperfections, that it's probably because you're pouring too cool. So I would just recommend having a look at both of those, because it could actually be that you're pouring too hot or it could be that you're pouring slightly too cool. Really just take what the manufacturer says as a rule of thumb, because ultimately, again, it's not going to be the same for everyone depending on a whole bunch of other different factors, such as what kind of room you're pouring in, the temperature of that, as well as how humid it is, how drafty it is, so many different factors. On the other hand though, it is worth mentioning that there is a very popular method called the Alex method, which I've seen a lot of candle makers using and getting on really well with. Personally, I haven't used it, so I can't really give you any more information on it, but I do think that the gist of it is you pour it at a very cool temperature, like just when it's getting cloudy and it's about to kind of start setting. But I will leave a link in the description box below if you would like to go and check that out and read any further information on it. But again, with soy wax, people have said that that is a really great method to use, so please do with that what you will. I'm going to throw in a little top tip here as well. I have spoken about it in the past on my hot throw video, which has done really well, but I'm going to say it again in case you haven't seen that, is it is so important to invest in a good thermometer. I would personally recommend a digital thermometer, the kind that are normally used for meat. I will leave that one again linked in the description box below if you would like to check it out. But basically I would just recommend having a good thermometer that you know is accurate, because when we're talking about varying temperatures by 5 degrees, you want to know that the temperature that it's reading actually is accurate at the end of the day, of course. Otherwise, if you're going to start altering them and it's actually a completely different temperature, then there is no wonder that you might be getting any imperfections or weird stuff going on with your candles. Now, I touched on it briefly just there, but my second tip is to be aware of what the temperature is in the room that you're pouring your candles in, and that's because that has another big role to play as well. A lot of the time when you do have anything going wrong with your candles in terms of poor glass adhesion or any rough surfaces, as well as other things as well, to be honest with you, a lot of the time that is because you could be pouring in a room which is too low in temperature. So I have read that apparently 21 degrees Celsius is kind of about ambient temperature for pouring candles. At the end of the day, you really do want to make sure though that basically that you're not getting any drafts coming in, because that could affect the way that the candles actually set. And at the end of the day, if you are again pouring in a room which is too cold, basically your candles will start setting way too quickly, and that is when, especially with soy wax, you can have weird and wonderful things happening with them, and especially on the tops. My next tip is to preheat your jars if you are able to. And by that I do mean to please do check and be careful before you start doing any of this to make sure that your jars are able to be heated up. For example, if you're using ceramics, then this probably isn't a tip for you. But if you are using glass, like myself, we use jam jars, and I have had people ask in the past how are they suitable for making candles in. And the reason for that is because if they are meant to be used for jam, what you do before you make jam is you sterilize your jars, in which they have to be heated up to, I think, around 100 degrees. So basically that means that they are absolutely fine to be heated to 80 to 100 degrees because that's what they're made for. So what I would recommend is, if you are able to, and please do be careful with this, to preheat your jars, I would probably recommend trying this in your oven if you are able to, on probably the lowest setting that you have, maybe like 80 degrees about, just for about 5 minutes or so, until the jars are basically heated through, and then seeing if that has any positive impact on the finish. Another thing you can do is preheat the jars with a heat gun just before you're ready to pour. So it might be that you've added your oils, you've stirred, and then you could just quickly go over them with a heat gun. And I have seen people using kind of like plate warmers again, so I will leave a little picture in here to show you what I mean. I've not used that personally, but it's something that I've heard other people using and getting on with well again. Tip number 4 may seem obvious, but I do just want to raise the point that it is important to make sure that your oils, whether it's essential oils or fragrance oils that you're using with your candles, are properly incorporated into your wax. If not, and let's say you're just popping the oil in, giving it a little whisk around and then pouring them into your jars, then again, I wouldn't be surprised if you are having any imperfections, because of course, if you have parts of the candle which have excess oil, then it is probably going to cause some problems for you. So what I would recommend doing is slowly but thoroughly mixing your oils into your wax for about 2 minutes. You want to be stirring it gently, but not incorporating any air into the wax. But if you are whisking it, then I would say it is likely that you could be getting some air pockets or bumps on your candles. I'm going to throw in another little top tip here, and that is to make sure that you're keeping really good notes whilst you are getting started with making candles, so that you know, okay, what temperature did I pour this wax at? How long did I stir for? were the jars preheated, all of those different factors that I've just spoken about. Just be sure to keep thorough notes so that you can go back and look at what has worked and what potentially has not worked. And then you can hopefully cherry pick those things which have worked, put them all together and basically have your recipe for candle making. Tip number 5 is a biggie, and although it's something that is probably not as easily implemented as the previous tips, it is one which I want to talk about because it's probably the biggest thing which has made a real difference to the overall look of our candles and basically the amount of effort that we have to put in to create a really beautiful looking candle. So that is to look into different blends of wax, and that could mean creating different blends yourself, which I've heard of people doing and again getting on well with, or it could mean buying a pre-blended wax, which is what we actually do. So we buy a soy coconut blend wax. It still doesn't have any weird ingredients in it, it's completely natural. However, I do feel like the introduction of the coconut to the wax really does help for us, probably mostly with glass adhesion, which if you don't know is how well the wax actually dries and sticks to the jar. So we used to have kind of some issues with wet spots where the wax would pull away from the sides of the jar. We did previously use Golden Brand's Golden Wax 464, which is a 100% soy wax. And again, we did have some issues with uneven tops. So honestly, from my experience, I have gone through each of those different factors, and when I thought that I had it all sussed out, the next day I would go and do the exact same thing, and again, I would be met with uneven tops or other issues as well. So soy is generally very fickle, if you didn't know, and I have heard of other people basically just making their own blend where they would take a soy wax or 100% soy wax and they would just add coconut oil to that, and it would really help with the finish of the candles. So generally what I've read is that whenever you add coconut to a soy wax, it just is much more forgiving. So if you are early on, I would just really recommend, no matter what wax you're using, to not put all of your eggs in one basket, so to speak. Just be sure that before you even launch, really, you are 100% happy with that wax, because when you are able to, you're probably going to want to start buying that in bulk, and really you don't want to be left with a whole lot of wax if you realize that actually it's not really the one for you. Honestly, in hindsight, if I could go back, I probably would have used this soy coconut wax from the very beginning. So I have learned the hard way, I guess, but all of that trial and error has evidently been worth it, because we are now super duper happy with the wax that we use and our candles, of course. Lastly, I just want to talk about a couple of tips which I can recommend if you do have uneven tops on your candles currently, and that's why you've come to this video and you are looking at ways to fix them so they are still sellable. My first tip is to use a heat gun. Again, I've spoken about these in the past. I have one, I've had several in the past, but I will leave a link in the description box below to the heat gun that I'm currently using. Honestly, it's great if you are having any uneven surfaces. If you just use it for a short space of time, I would say, over the top of the candle. Be careful not to get too close to it, otherwise you will cause a lot of mess. And I have had people asking if hair dryers work in the past. Personally, I would steer away from those because I think you could just do more damage than good. However, I can speak for the heat guns. They are really, really great for resetting your candle top, basically to get a nice smooth surface. My second tip is to try the double pouring method. And by that, what I mean is when you are pouring your candles, to leave about an inch or half an inch from the top of the candle jar, coming back once those candles are set and just filling it up to the top of the candle jar. Honestly, it's been a long time since I myself have tried this method, but I have heard from other people that they get on with this, and it's a great way to achieve those smooth tops that we all strive for. So that is it for today's video. I really do hope, as always, that you found it useful. If you do have any other tips, then please do feel free to share them in the comment section below to let everybody else know. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next one. Bye guys!